Hello. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our webinar specifically for DevOps engineers, showing you some of the best practices for Copilot for DevOps. We'll get started in just a few moments. Hello, welcome. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar, Copilot for DevOps engineers. We'll get started in just a couple minutes. So as you're joining, feel free to drop in the chat. Where are you joining us from today? And maybe something that you're excited about in the upcoming weeks. What are you excited about in the upcoming weeks? Welcome, everybody. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar, Copilot for DevOps engineers. My name's Aisha, and I'm really excited to walk through some of these scenarios with you today. As you're joining, feel free to drop in the chat where are you joining from and one thing you're excited for in the upcoming weeks. And we'll get started in just a couple minutes. And in today's session, we're going to have an opportunity to see how AI can solve some of those pain points for DevOps engineers. It is meant to be an interactive session, even though I can't see you all, but the chat is going to be our way of communicating. So please use the chat, drop your questions in the chat, definitely share what your thoughts are. We're also going to be showing some of the new developments with Copilot for DevOps V7, which is our latest update. And there are a lot of exciting things with this new update. So feel free to drop in the chat as you're going through the webinar. What's coming up for you? What are your thoughts on what you're seeing? And again, we'll get started in just a couple minutes. Amazing. In the chat, joining from Florida, excited about Turkey Day. Amazing. Thank you for joining us today. All right. Let's dive in. Let's dive into today's session. Again, this is for DevOps engineers. It's a bit of a tailored presentation. And of course, you can certainly share your thoughts, share your use cases as we go through. This is meant to be interactive, so add your thoughts to the chat, add your questions to the chat, and let's dive right in. Before we get into the demonstration, let's acknowledge the reality of DevOps work today. Most DevOps engineers deal with challenges that don't start in the pipeline. They start way upstream in planning. Things like unclear requirements, constant scope changes, inconsistent documentation, poor cross-team communication, and limited visibility into dependencies. These kinds of issues can really slow down delivery long before a build even runs. Often you might be handed incomplete information or last-minute changes or artifacts that make your job harder than it needs to be. And that's why Copilot for DevOps focuses on cleaning up the chaos before anything reaches your pipelines. To get a sense of where you're coming from today, let's start with a quick poll. So we'll launch a poll here. And the question is, which of these really is a major pain point for you today? Which one really is resonating with you? Is it unclear or incomplete requirements, frequent scope changes, causing rework, too much manual repetitive work, poor cross-team communication and alignment? Is it outdated or inconsistent documentation, limited visibility into dependencies, or high pressure to maintain stability? What are some of your big challenges? Okay. All right, 100% of the people here say frequent scope changes. Oh, it's changing. It's changing. Okay. So we have limited visibility into dependencies right now is in the lead. And then frequent scope changes causing rework. So these are some of the biggest pain points that people are experiencing. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing that. Very, very helpful to have this context. So now let's dive in to how Copilot for DevOps starts to resolve some of these major challenges. Let me reshare my screen. Okay. Thank you so much again, everyone, for taking the time to answer that poll. It really does help us as we continue with this webinar. Copilot for DevOps is meant to solve some of these challenges, some of these pain points. This powerful AI-driven extension for Azure DevOps is created specifically for requirements management, and it can definitely support DevOps engineers such as yourselves. It injects a robust feature set into Azure DevOps, which empowers users with many different features, which we're going to go through today, such as AI-assisted authoring aligned with your standards, both internal and external, automated refinement, and of course, template-driven consistency. Modern requirements, which is we'll say the mother of Copilot for DevOps. Modern requirements has a long-standing relationship with Microsoft. We are Microsoft's go-to requirements partner and the only requirement management solution built natively on Azure DevOps. So this relationship opened the door for the immense opportunity to bring the AI experience to Azure DevOps through Copilot for DevOps. Copilot for DevOps is the #1 AI assistant native to Azure DevOps. It's backed by Azure's open AI security policy. Users can be confident their data is secure, and early adopters are reporting improvements in efficiencies within their projects, such as faster authoring, fewer review cycles, and significant reduction in overall project costs. And this is because Copilot for DevOps is packed with capabilities that address some of the most inefficient elements of your project, as you shared earlier today. We're excited to showcase the capabilities of Copilot for DevOps and how you can address your regulatory compliance and all of your DevOps engineering needs directly within Azure DevOps. So let's go ahead and dive right in. One moment, sharing screen. Here we go. Excellent. Now, Copilot for DevOps has been designed as that tool within Azure DevOps, which can support you with a variety of functions. And one of the things that we heard from many of you today is there can be a challenge with, of course, knowing what to work on, when to work on it, especially when there are constantly changes happening, a lot of dependencies as well in projects. So imagine you have been asked to enhance the customer portal. And you want to make sure that you have all of the pertinent information, but everything is scattered. You have your stakeholder requests from transcripts. You might have a Word file that has information about the structure for the dashboard. Everything is scattered and it's very unclear what is required in this change request. So what we can do is use the elicit function within Copilot for DevOps to take the raw text and raw artifacts and turn them into structured work items, such as user stories for the new dashboard, such as tasks for environment changes, etc. So we open Copilot for DevOps from our context menu. And once we do this, the work item that we selected is going to be the, oh, give me one moment here. All right, excellent. So we've opened up Copilot for DevOps against the customer portal enhancement. This is our epic, and we're going to use this to elicit some features. In addition to having the context of the original epic, we also have a transcript from a stakeholder meeting. And this transcript contains very unstructured data about what is needed. You have many different stakeholders present in this particular transcript. So it might be challenging to decide how to prioritize these different items, what exactly needs to be built. So we can utilize elicit, and we can, from the dropdown, select the AI model that we want to use. Now you're going to notice that with Copilot for DevOps V7, we have options that you can choose from, including GPT-5. For this example, we'll go with 4.1, and the setup elicitation button can be found here, where we can then upload those attachments. So maybe this is your PDF with stakeholder change requests. Perhaps this is your CSV file that has particular architectural considerations, or maybe your transcript from a stakeholder meeting. So we'll go ahead and upload our attachment. I'll bring in our transcript. Upload. By the way, you can upload multiple files, and we'll drill down to work items, meaning we can use this data to create our features, our stories, test cases, tasks, etc. So in the chat, feel free to drop in as you're seeing this. What are your specific use cases that you'd like us to explore using the tool? Now we can choose given input for the system to create our features, in this case, title and description. Select the desired work item type. Copilot for DevOps inherits your process template. So any work items you have in the system can be selected from the dropdown. And then you can choose your desired output fields. Also, of course, custom instructions are available. Now, let's say you wanted to give the system a little bit more context on what it needs to do. Maybe we can say, show new onboarding flows, including quick insights dashboard, right? So we're giving the system a little bit more context on how to create the titles of our work items. You can rewrite the prompt if necessary. And rewriting the prompt will make this prompt a little bit more clear. It gives some extra context as well. And then for our details, we could certainly add this information in as well for the details section. And if you have what we call a text block, which is repeatable context that you can use across your project, you can simply insert that here. And what is a text block? A text block is repeatable language or structure or context or instructions that can be saved, shared with your team members, and they can also be available across your different projects. So here we have one that says always add at least one non-functional acceptance criterion for portal-related stories. So we could certainly insert this information into our custom instructions, and the system will use that as context for creating our desired work items. So let's go ahead, generate to see the results. You can see that the attachment is still being used as context here. Feel free to drop in the chat any questions you may have as we go through. You can select all of these items, or you can select individual ones. You can also click See More, and the system will continue to generate options for you. And this can be very valuable for DevOps engineers because oftentimes there may be missing requirements that you for whatever reason, they may not have been clarified upfront. And the system can help you discover some of those missing requirements by clicking See More. So that's an option you have available. You can see the system used our instruction of integrating the Quick Insights dashboard, clear acceptance criteria, clear headings, and now you can go ahead and create your linked work items. So we'll bring these features in as children of our epic, create, and here you go. This particular feature is now living in Azure DevOps. We could open it up in Azure DevOps, and you can see here that there has been a tag added for Copilot for DevOps. This is an admin setting that is very easy to switch on so that whenever you're creating your work items from Elicit, they will be tagged immediately with Copilot for DevOps. And this helps you so that you can create a query later on to show which are those AI-generated work items. Any thoughts or questions about the Elicit function so far? Feel free to drop those in the chat. Now let's continue on with our process of generating work items. We have our feature. Now let's drill down into one of these items to create user stories. You'll notice that you have any output fields that live in Azure DevOps that are rich text fields will be available from the dropdown. So you can choose which ones you'd like to select. If you want to add additional context, you could use setup elicitation, upload additional files, use your custom instructions to provide additional context. You can see here for our user story, we already had something which is referencing ISO 9001. So perhaps your stakeholders have told you in a recent call that when you're deploying, you need to start thinking about how these items are associated with ISO 9001, how they meet the requirements of ISO 9001. So if there are any standards that you use or that your teams use that you're thinking you might want to start implementing earlier on in the requirements cycle, feel free to drop those in the chat and we can certainly look at those as well. But in this example, we're going with ISO 9001 and we'll go ahead and generate user stories. You can use custom instructions for identifying how your acceptance criteria should look, for choosing specific templates. For instance, you can decide how you want the system to structure your description, what kind of headings you want in your description. Do you want your acceptance criteria to be written in Gherkin format? All of these things can be chosen in the custom instructions. And for repeatability across your projects, you could use those text blocks. So here we've selected 3 user stories to work with. These are going to assist with enhancing the customer portal. And you're seeing that we're starting to turn the chaos into a little bit more of a structured backlog. Excellent. Now you see that a lot of great context has been added here. Let's go ahead and create our linked work items. The user stories will be children of the feature. And there we go. You can, of course, drill down even further into the stories to create your test cases or even your development tasks or your deployment tasks. You could generate directly from here as well. So as an example, I'm going to generate some tasks and I'll give the system a specific instruction to create deployment related tasks. We could always use rewrite prompt because rewrite prompt can sometimes add additional context, which can be helpful. And I'll go ahead and add this into my details as well. Once you find a prompt that works well for you, best practice is to save that prompt as a text block. So you could not only share it with your team, but also reuse it in different projects. So what are your thoughts so far on the elicit function, on custom instructions, on the text block, being able to reuse all of this information? Feel free to drop that in the chat. And definitely, by the way, the more you use the chat, the more helpful it will be for moving the webinar because I can absolutely adapt to what you're asking or what your requirements are. Now, we have a few tasks here. Of course, you could select all of these. Maybe all of these are going to be beneficial for this particular deployment. So you can select as many as you'd like, and you're going to see on the right-hand side, you have this full title and description. Now, using AI Edit, which you have available here, this magic wand, this can be very supportive of your DevOps engineer role because you can do things like add additional context. For instance, we might want a bit of a longer, more in-depth description for these tasks. So you can easily use some of these little shortcuts here to enhance your work items. You can see more context has been provided. You can also chat with the work item. So you could say, for instance, as an example, rewrite descriptions So they read like a DevOps playbook or DevOps runbook, pre-checks, deploy steps, post checks, and validation. And you could even take it a step further. You could tell it to use imperative verbs like run or roll back. And you could even tell it what reading level to target. You could say things like highlight risks and rollback steps. So we're asking the system to take this task to another level here. Of course, rewrite prompt is always helpful just to make sure that the prompt is clear. And then we'll send this through. So let us know in the chat, what are your thoughts on this function? How could this help you? Where could you see this benefiting you? And maybe you're not seeing where it can benefit you just yet. Put that in the chat as well. We can talk about that as well. Okay, so now the system is starting to rewrite the descriptions. What I really like about this tool is that it also tells you what it's doing. It tells you the reasoning behind some of the actions it's taking. Okay, so we can say apply the changes to the description. By the way, you can also run some versioning as well. So you can show changes that have taken place in your requirement or your task. And you can make comparisons as well. And then you always have the ability to revert back to previous versions if necessary. Okay, so here we go. We have a full DevOps runbook, pre-checks, deployment steps, post-deployment, validation, potential risks, and rollback procedures. And we can, of course, check and compare with the original. We could restore the original if necessary. And let's go ahead and save and close this task. Create a linked work item. And you might be someone who wants to ensure that you have all of your required fields filled in as well. Good news with Copilot for DevOps V7, the system is going to prompt you to fill in those required fields before it actually creates the work item in your system. So original estimate, we'll say this is 5. In fact, let's be more realistic, we'll say it's 12. And then save. And here's another one. We need to fill in this one, so we'll say 7. So if you have any required fields in your system, with Copilot for DevOps V7, it's going to allow you to clarify those custom fields. And that way it ensures all of your work items are created and no information is missing. What are your thoughts on this update? This is a pretty good one. Of course, you can drill down even further. Maybe you'd like to break this task into multiple tasks. So you want to have your pre-check tasks be separate from your deployment step tasks, etc. You can certainly drill down and continue to drill down into deeper levels. So you've seen how easily you can turn messy, inconsistent work item descriptions and your context provided from stakeholders like transcripts or your email notes or your tickets. You can take all of that and turn it into a structured backlog very easily. You can even see the breadcrumb here. We went from epic to feature to story to task, just like that. Of course, you can just as easily generate your test cases as well using the exact same type of process that we saw earlier. So now moving forward, you've created a structured backlog, you have your requirements, you have your test scenarios, you have your different follow-up tasks that you want to incorporate. You might want to start thinking about prioritization. How do we prioritize the work items? And are there ways that you can tailor the prioritization as well? The answer to that is yes, you absolutely can. So we're going to go back to our backlog after we create this work item. So we're adding it in with the tested by link type. Again, you have a full hierarchy of work items here. So let's come back into our backlog. And at this stage, you may want to identify and then open up Copilot for DevOps. Now you want to see which items really matter for reliability and customer experience. So you can come into Analyze. You'll notice all of those work items are going to be used as input. You can have the system analyze different fields. So this is a bit of a best practice for people using the Analyze function. Select your desired fields that you want the system to analyze. And then we can also do things like look at, for instance, the priority. We had certain priorities that might have been selected, or effort. And you can also use custom instructions with your analyze function as well. This is a great way to make sure that your analysis is relevant and that it's accurate. So we could say, for instance, when analyzing work items, prioritize anything that affects off performance monitoring or production data paths. We could tell it what to deprioritize. We could say, flag items as being lower priority if they meet a certain criteria, and then generate to see the results. So the analysis definitely benefits from custom instructions. Would love to encourage folks on the call to try it out, see if you can tweak your analysis based off of data that is relevant to you. Oh, and let me make sure I choose the right method. So here we have selected the 6C method, which is great for identifying quality ratings. But in this example, let's go with the Moscow method so that we can identify what are the would have, the should haves, the must haves, what are the could haves. So the system has provided us with quite a few must haves here. A couple should haves and a couple could haves for this particular sprint. You can read the rationale for those ratings, and then of course there are suggested improvements as well that can support you with the overall quality of the work items. You could copy and paste this into a different application and use this to support you with prioritizing your requirements when you have changes. Are there any questions so far? Any questions, any thoughts on what you're seeing so far? Feel free to drop anything in the chat. Okay, now you've seen how easily you can generate your requirements from unstructured data, how easily you can analyze your information and prioritize the details as well. One thing that is constantly happening, and this is what was brought up in the original poll, is how plans keep changing. There are last-minute portal changes, last-minute change requests that could create hidden breakage. So how do we assess this and ensure that nothing breaks? We can do that using the impact assessment function. So I'm going to select an item here and open up Copilot for DevOps. As usual, you can utilize the custom instructions with your impact assessment as well, so that you can give the system additional context on what it needs to do. So here we have impact assessment. And perhaps you've received a change request. By the way, you're going to notice here on the right-hand side, this little message comes up because yes, you do have the ability to use some of our GPT-5 models for running a lot of these different functions. And just being aware of the fact that when we are using GPT-5, it could take a little bit longer. However, you're getting very high quality in your results. So here's a change explanation. Maybe the product team has decided that the quick insights dashboard should show live data, not cache data. So before we agree to this, we can run an impact assessment on the stories that we have, or on selected stories. By the way, you can select multiple work items using queries. So you could generate a really in-depth impact assessment. You could also, of course, use work item ID or title to select specific work items. So I'll select this user story and also the first one here, and then perform analysis. You also have the ability to customize how the analysis is generated, the degree of impact that you want to see in the assessment. For instance, our impact assessments can be rated from 0, meaning there is absolutely no impact, all the way up to 5, which is a critical level impact. And you can decide what your threshold is, what are the items you want to see in your assessment. So this work item has a 5 out of 5 level impact, which is critical. Here is an impact explanation. And then there are some follow-up tasks that you can take on to make sure that you're effectively following up on this change. So this is very in-depth, very, very in-depth. For those who are familiar with previous versions of Copilot for DevOps, V7 has made significant enhancements here, as you can see, just the level of depth. Now we can analyze our next level. So this story is certainly linked to other work items. You might want to understand how the other items are impacted. And that can be done quite easily by analyzing the next level. So feel free to drop in the chat. What are your use cases? What are your thoughts so far on what you're seeing? Okay, critical level impact again. And if we continue to analyze, we'll see if any of those direct links are also critically impacted. You can't remove the human touch from this process. We still need to review and see, does this impact explanation make sense? Is this relevant? What about these tasks? Are they all going to be necessary, or can we tweak some of them? All right, so here we go. We see more and more impacts here. Some of these are hidden impacts as well, which if you don't catch them up front, they could potentially cause things to break later on. You can save your impact assessment into Word or PDF. I'll generate a PDF here. And now we have a clear assessment that could be shared with stakeholders. But also, we can use this impact assessment for the next part of our process, which is creating those release notes. So now you've finalized the potential tasks that need to be taken for this portal upgrade. You want to create your release notes, come into SOP document generator. There are some great enhancements as well with this generator from V7 that you might find interesting. So I'll go ahead, I'll choose O3 Mini for this particular function. And you can provide a prompt or instructions. So we're going to say, generate release notes and include feature summary, benefits to users, technical impact, and known risks. You could always rewrite your prompt if necessary. And by the way, you are able to upload your files if you need as well. So we're going to upload our impact assessment. And by the way, we could also upload the original transcript that was used. So you have options. You can add your uploads. Also, by the way, you can select work items as reference. So you can choose a query of work items that you want to include. This, of course, is going to be very beneficial when you're working with release notes, of course, because that way you ensure everything that you need is included. So I'll go ahead and I'm going to upload the file here. Let's see. Here's my impact assessment. Upload. We can tell the system as well to consider the tasks in the impact assessment and the implication on the overall deployment. So we can simply generate, or we could generate with Q&A, which would then have the system ask a series of questions that you can answer. You can provide your answers, which will then tailor how the system creates the documentation. So it presents it in a really structured way. It can be very helpful. And in this example, we are skipping that part and just going straight into the creation of the document. We've given it quite a bit of context, quite a bit of information, and the system can utilize that to create the first draft. One of the bits of feedback that we've received quite a few times from different users is that it's much easier to build out that initial document and then make the edits afterwards than it is to start from scratch, building your first draft. So here we have our release notes, feature summary, performance impact and testing. We have scalability, information implementation, tasks and guidelines, deployment and rollback strategies if necessary. You can always regenerate your document or save it to Word or PDF. And a really fun enhancement with V7 is that you can select your own Word template to utilize. So we're going to go ahead and use the default template here. But this is really a game changer for teams who need to use their letterheads. They need to make sure that they have the correct logo and certain footers and headers in their documents. So now we have our structured release notes, even table of contents included here, created in a couple of minutes when this type of task can normally take hours, if not days, to perform. Excellent. Now, you've seen quite a few different functions here, how you can create your work items, prioritize and analyze them, generate your documentation. And of course, you could always use the chat function, which allows you to have a conversation with the system. You could ask the system, for instance, to identify quick insights related work items that are at risk when we deploy. We can say give reasons as well, give reasons for your assessment. So you can always tell the system how to treat your data. You can, of course, call queries, create queries. With Copilot for DevOps V7, you can also access your wikis directly from the chat. You can create, delete wikis as well. So a lot of information can be utilized by this tool. You can upload files. The system has provided us a risk assessment here. It's focused on these two work items in particular, and it's provided reasons for this. We could go a step further. We could ask it to mitigate these risks with enhancements to the description and acceptance criteria if relevant. So hopefully you're seeing some ways that you could use the chat function as an assistant directly within Azure DevOps that can support you with some of your roles. You could tell the system, for instance, be concise. You could tell them to link work items. You could tell it to generate a query for work items that are missing a risk field, for instance, if you have a specific field. Because remember, the fields in your work items are going to be inherited by Copilot for DevOps. So as long as it's in a field, it can be analyzed and it can be worked with. The chat function, we could obviously spend all day on this function, but we're going to close out our webinar at this point. Of course, there are many tools available that can support you with your work and your DevOps workflows. So let us now talk a little bit about the support that you have available for adopting Copilot for DevOps and applying it to your workflows. We have AI for DevOps Academy, which is currently available at no cost for a limited time. It does have a value of $3,000 per organization, but we're offering it complimentary at this stage so that you're able to benefit from that tool. So give me one moment. I'm actually noticing I'm not sharing the page. One moment, please. Okay, here we go. Excellent. So you can see here that we have our AI for DevOps Academy available. It is free for a limited period, and this will assist you with learning some of the best practices for different roles. We have different learning pathways for different roles. One of those pathways actually is for DevOps engineers, release engineers. So it can show some of the best practices for working with the tool. You do get certification so that you can show your expertise as well. So feel free to scan that barcode here. And we look forward to seeing you soon in the Academy. Thank you so much to everybody who has been here on this call. And we hope that you have been able to gain something from this. Please feel free to reach out if you have any additional questions and play with the tool, play with Copilot for DevOps, see how it can support you with your role. Thank you so much, everybody.